Hello everyone, I am your host Ingrid Thompson and welcome to So You Want to Start a Business episode number 86. Our guest today is Brendan Lundberg and there is so much to say about this interview that I am just not quite sure where to start. Maybe it's best to let Brendan have these very first words.
Well, it's been a pleasure and it's been a lot of fun. I'll just say this, I do feel tremendous, honor is the right word, to do what I get to do, to be part of something that is intimately and importantly impactful to people's lives, to ease suffering. But what excites me even more is that there's so many people who are hurting, right? They're in chronic pain, physically, even emotionally. That's not really our specific focus, but it's related in many ways, right? Mm-hmm. So what I look at our ability to do is not only ease suffering in a safe and effective way, but to educate people and to empower them with the tools and with the confidence and the resources where we see them start to make changes, where they lose weight, they get engaged back in the hobbies and the activities and the relationships that make them feel joy and connected and productive. And that's what motivates me, is to be able to hopefully enter through pain, but shift society through so much other things that people can gain by better understanding about their brains and their bodies. And so anyway, I'm pleased to be here and share the message, and hopefully it helps some of the listeners out there in one way or another.
This is the voice of Brendan Lundberg, and his business is Radiant Pain Relief. He's completely changing the way people manage pain. There's some pretty scary stats out there about opioid addiction, and it's Brendan's mission to change the way people deal with their chronic pain. Brendan has worked in other businesses and helped them build those businesses to be successful. And he's been frustrated at how they treated employees, so he wanted to build a business that would make a difference. I truly love in this interview the way he talks about his community, his clients and his customers, and the way they communicate. Listen out for this in the interview. He speaks about how they trickle information to the people. No mention of that dreaded F word, the funnel. Those of you who know me know how much I detest that word, that F word. Brendan is so very respectful of people. And when you think about the people he's working with, people who are in pain all the time, there's nothing short of delightful the way he speaks about people. He talks about the work they do and how retraining the brain is a process of repetition and re-exposure. They are using technology to retrain the brain for all of those people suffering from chronic pain. He talks about how people get caught up in the milestones and miss the journey and the absolute pleasure of building a business. There's never a perfect time for business, and he talks about taking the learning, some people call it failure, and growing from that learning. In this interview, he talks about the difficulties of raising capital. They've raised a couple of $1 million recently from investors who really want to change the world. He's written a book called Radiant Relief with a co-author, and it is terrific. And there's a private link in the show notes for your access to that. They've created a membership model in the health environment, one of the first companies to do this. His advice to people wanting to get started in business, just start. Anyway, there is so much in this interview. And one of my favorite things he talks about is a quote that says, "Don't diminish who you are, be more of who you are." I love that. Anyway, as always, there is no advertising on this podcast. This episode is brought to you by my book, So You Want to Start a Business, same name as the podcast. Head over to wherever you buy your books online for the Kindle or the physical book. Audio version of the book is being made available through this podcast. You might want to cycle back through some of the episodes where I'm reading chapters of the book in the podcast, and there's more on the way. Anyway, enough from me. Let's listen to what Brendan has to say about starting and running his own business and so much more, because he does actually talk about managing pain. The other thing I'll just point out is that we actually did record this a couple of months ago, so there's reference to snow and warm weather in Sydney, which of course is now the other way around. So anyway, here we go with Brendan. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, and here we are with Brendan Lundberg. Hello, Brendan.
Hello, Ingrid. How are you?
Great. How are you today?
So well, coming from Portland, Oregon, where it's beautiful and sunny.
It's a beautiful sunny day here in Sydney, although I think it's probably a little bit cooler where you are than it is here. So, yeah.
It is. We had snow yesterday. No snow today, but it's definitely cool.
It's definitely cool. Well, it's definitely hot here. We're in the middle of our February, which is our dripping hot, humid month of the year. So, Brendan, tell us about your business. I'm so excited about this conversation. I have been thinking about it. And what's your business? Tell us about your business.
Thank you. Yeah. So I founded a company called Radiant Pain Relief Centers, and we have offices here in Portland right now, and plans to grow them throughout the U.S. and throughout the country, throughout North America, and throughout the world strategically as it makes sense. But we are changing the way that chronic pain is understood and how it's treated, and building a much more safe and consistently effective and appealing solution to this really big, very human problem of chronic pain.
Of chronic pain. Yeah. So when you talk about pain, it's not about inflicting pain, it's about relieving pain, isn't it?
It's about relieving pain. Yeah. And doing it in a way that is, frankly, much safer. I mean, we have in many parts of the world this opioid addiction epidemic that's really plaguing societies and disrupting people's lives and taking people's lives. In the U.S., I don't know what the numbers were in Australia or other countries, but in the U.S. in 2017, 72,000 people died of opioid overdoses, which is just mind-boggling that people would be dying of medications in this day and age. That, you know, obviously many of those were in abusive types of situation, but the fact that these are being prescribed and they have the tendency to be so risky is time for something safer and better.
So of that 72,000, some of those are completely accidental, aren't they? By taking too many at the wrong time. You know,
Sure.
that doesn't, I mean, like you said, it's also addiction and there's problems in that, but it's accidental death as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And even those that haven't, fortunately lost their life, millions are being disrupted because these medications are very powerful. And, pain is a very human thing. And every human that's ever been born or our caveman ancestors before us all experience pain. And we learn very primitively that if we drink alcohol or if we take a product like opium, then we can mask the pain and we can feel better. And industry has really been born out of that. And those things are very effective in the short term, but because they're so effective in the short term, they've really, frankly, minimized the necessity, the urgency for us to understand pain at a deeper, more modern scientific level, which we're now doing. But we have all this industry kind of born around this idea of, pop a pill. It's the fast, easy fix. Yeah.
Well, and for anyone in pain, that instant relief is gratifying. So,
Sure.
One can understand we've all been in pain at some point and we just want it to stop. So it's working out how to make it stop.
How to make it stop. Yeah. And there's definitely a difference between chronic pain and acute pain, and the need to take an opioid because of an acute pain situation following a surgery or an injury as that's healing. That's probably appropriate in some cases, and I'm not trying to assign judgment to anybody that uses it. We all just want to feel better, but obviously it hasn't solved the problem. The pain population continues to grow worldwide. About 1 in 5 people across the globe have chronic pain, which is just a staggering number, which is more than cancer, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease combined. And so what we're trying to do is change the conversation to educate people about more modern pain science and deliver a therapy that is safe, no drugs, no needles, no surgery, no side effects, lasting relief by retraining the brain, which is really fun.
Oh, sounds fantastic. All right, let's get back to the business. So when did you start? When did you start this business?
So I founded the company in 2014. So we're coming on 5 years of operations, and it's really been 5 years of learning. We've been generating revenue and we've been growing modestly, but really we've looked at this period of time as kind of pre-revenue, even though we are generating revenue. It's just kind of a learning and tinkering time. We've proven and answered and refined some things in that process, and now we're looking to really scale it up and start to grow.
Fantastic. So back in 2014, why, and you've sort of answered it in our pre-discussion, but in a more specific, why did you start this business?
Well, I think like every entrepreneur, I saw an opportunity to build a business, right? To create some sort of accumulation or wealth or revenue generation. But it's become so much more than that for me, because it's been 5 years and the business is still quite modest in terms of its revenue. And it's really more about seeing people get their lives restored back and seeing an opportunity and feeling kind of uniquely responsible, both, a responsibility and an opportunity to help change society by changing this conversation around pain and delivering a therapy that has the impact to make a big difference in people's lives on an individual level. And then hopefully societally, globally, just kind of get us to a higher level of engagement and understanding about our brains and about pain.
Yeah, the brain is so amazing, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
So so you said you've got an entrepreneurial mindset and, you're looking for an opportunity, but what did you want from the business? Like, what do you want from the business?
Well, my motivation initially, again, I think, desiring to be able to provide a level of income and comfort for my family at some point, even though realizing that in the entrepreneurial journey, it typically means a period of sacrifice that precedes some sort of return. I was not blind to that. But my motivation was that I had worked for two companies that were very successful growth award-winning companies in the United States. I played a key role in helping those businesses to grow. I saw the owners of those companies become wealthy, but I wasn't completely satisfied with the way that they treated their employees and the kind of the contribution that they made back into the world. And I really wanted to build a business that, yes, was successful, but build a business that had the ability to, make a difference in the lives of our employees, the lives of customers, and hopefully in, greater ways beyond that.
And it sounds like you're on track for that one. So, Brendan, does the business, you said you've been in business 5 years and you've been tinkering and learning, and does it feel real yet? Does it feel like a real business?
It feels absolutely real. But that's a great question because, I think all of us who have desires to be entrepreneurs, it's like, in some ways, it's easy for us to delay the sense of gratification or the sense of realism about this is a real thing, because it's easy to say, well, I can really be comfortable in my position as the CEO or as a business owner once we have a certain amount of revenue or a certain number of employees or a certain number of locations. And so you delay that. And really that's, it's intuitive probably to feel that way, but it's counterproductive because you're probably not stepping into the role and the responsibility and the opportunity that you'd have if you embrace being that before maybe there's the real manifestations of that. And then second is the experience of building a business is unlike anything else. It is entirely consuming. It is fun. It is challenging. It is rewarding. It taxes you in ways. I mean, I think besides becoming a parent, there is nothing that is more rewarding and challenging than building a business. And so if you're delaying the sense of like, oh, I can't really be happy until it gets a certain level of success, you're missing out on so much of what being an entrepreneur is really so amazing about,
That is such an insightful answer. Thank you. And it's so true in so many ways. So is there a point that you can point to and say that's when it felt real for you? Yeah.
In 2016, I think it was, I started to invest pretty heavily in my own personal development.
Yep.
I started reading, something that was always kind of interesting to me. And I think that's part of the mix of my mindset and personality of wanting to start a company. But it was really like focusing on being present, being in the, kind of honoring the struggle. One thought leader in particular, I really anchored to another Brendan Burchard. I don't know if he's popular in Australia. I have many, I joined his mastermind group. I went through many of his courses. I became a certified high performance coach through his program. I actually have many friends from Australia that I met through him. But just the idea that you can change your reality by changing your mindset. I mean, we see the world not as the world is, but as we are. So if we're feeling frustrated, if we're feeling lack, if we're feeling a disconnect from who it is we want to be, then we filter things, our experiences through that. But if we can become much more present, much more grateful, I think it's a huge piece of that. Much more, engaged in the ownership of both the good and bad of what the reality is in the current moment, then the reward happens immediately. I mean, like in that shift, in that time, as I went through that transition, the reward, the pleasure, the challenge, the everything about being the owner of a company and being the CEO happened, even though we still weren't at the revenue milestones or the growth milestones or the employee milestones or whatever else it might be.
Yeah.
So those things become icing on the cake, I think.
Yeah, because it is. I was having another conversation with somebody this morning and they were saying something very similar, is that we get so caught up with those milestones that we actually forget to really just enjoy, well, not just enjoy, but to actually really enjoy this part of the growing of the business, because we don't get this opportunity again. Like once it starts to scale and gets bigger, we never have this again. Right. Maybe we'd wish we don't, but it is a very special time, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So you've been in business, as you say, kind of putting together this model. How do you know, and it's pretty obvious because you gave us some pretty big stats there at the beginning, but how do you know it's viable and that people will want what you're offering, that people will pay for it, that there's that it's a viable business model?
Well, that's a good question. I didn't know entirely with confidence that it would be, but so what we're doing is very novel. I mean, we're using technology to retrain the brain of the chronic pain sufferer, restore the brain and thereby the body back to a more normal perception of pain. It's very effective, but it's also it sounds like magic. Like it doesn't, most clinicians at least in the United States, are trained in pain science from the 1960s. So even the medical professionals generally don't understand the underlying science, and thereby it's hard for them to understand the mechanism of action of what we do. So there was a lot of proof in just kind of putting it to action. I think, if anybody's listening to this and they're like, I have this idea of this business I want to start or something, like the truth is there is never a perfect time. There's never perfect capital in the account. There's never perfect circumstances. The way you prove it is to get in motion, is to start it and to learn. And pretty quickly you'll either say like, I'm going to make this happen because it's important enough, or I see it's working, or you'll go, yeah, I tried it. I gave it my best and it wasn't the right thing. And I learned from it. And now I take that learning, which some would say failure, but it's learning that makes you better for the next time. So I wasn't too afraid of that. I had enough clinical, business experience that I could see the points that we needed to address early on. And there's definitely been a lot of learning since, but enough confidence to say, let's start and we'll see where it goes.
And see where it goes. And it's, as you said, you'd helped others build their businesses. And, it's all about timing for some businesses. They talk about some of the business ideas from 10, 20, 30 years ago, and they're coming to fruition now because the timing's right. So, there's so many factors to this, isn't there?
Yeah.
How did you fund, like you said, there's revenue stream there. How do you fund the business in the early days?
When we very first started, we had a business model that didn't require outside funding. We had enough internal capital to kind of get it started and start generating revenue. But as we realized that we needed to grow faster than that revenue was going to allow us to do it, we started to look for ways to raise money, frankly. And, that's been a whole school and a whole experience of how do you go from raising money? There's in the United States, there's a very popular show called Shark Tank. I'm sure you have.
Yes,
yeah,
we have.
And,
yep. Same name, in fact.
Is that right? Yeah. In Canada, it's very popular too, but has a different name. I can't remember what it's called. But and so we look at this as like, oh, this is fun, this is easy. But the truth is, raising money is very difficult, and it's a process and experience unlike anything else. So if you can avoid having to do that, you can fund it, or you can create a business that doesn't require outside capital. It's going to make the process probably easier and faster, but that's how we've done it. We've raised a couple $1 million privately from angel investors that see the opportunity to make the world a better place.
Fantastic. Congratulations, Brendan, because I know it's very difficult. I'm involved with a couple of tech startups, and the amount of time and money and energy that goes into raising money just takes away from the actual building of the business. So, getting that balance right is very, very tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a full-time job.
It's a full-time job indeed. So now, how do you find new customers? Like, where are they? How do you find them? How do they find you?
Well, obviously the appeal for many businesses now is the ability to market online. Broadcast media and mass media is very expensive and cost prohibitive in many cases. Plus you're really, you're making a message that may not be resonating with a lot of people when you do that. So we haven't really spent in that. We've done mostly, try to do grassroots things, word of mouth, events, education to other clinicians that touch, in our case, clients that are in pain. But most recently last year, my co-founder, Dr. Farley, David Farley, and myself, we wrote a book which became an Amazon bestseller, and it's called Radiant Relief, a case for a better solution to chronic pain. So we wrote a book because even if we had all the money that we need, we can't open clinics overnight. There's a process of, hiring and building out and everything and training. So what we wanted to do though is enter the conversation and to become a relevant part of the conversation. We figured a book would be a great way to do that. So we wrote a book. It became an Amazon bestseller right away. Inc. magazine wrote about the book. They called it a manifesto and an epic example of how to create a movement, which was very flattering. And that's what we want to do, is create a movement. So now we've begun an online campaign to give the book away. An interested party would just pay basically the cost of shipping and handling. We send them the book, but we get their name and their email address in the process. And now we can begin a conversation with them. We can educate them and trickle value and insights and client testimonials. And then that allows us to, not just have to have a one touch point and hopefully convert that person into a client or a fan or an investor, but build these relationships that can flourish over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And is that book still available to people?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So do you want to tell people right now where they could get that?
Let's give it to them for free if you'd like, your listeners.
Yeah. There's about half the audience of this podcast is in the US. So even though I'm coming from Australia, we do have a very strong following in the US. So if you want to give that website or where people can go.
Well, I can do it, or I can give you a private link afterwards that you
Private
can.
link, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that afterwards. And just the book is called Radiant Thinking.
It's called Radiant Relief.
Radiant Relief.
A case for a better solution to chronic pain.
A case for a better solution to chronic pain. So if anyone's listening and in chronic pain, or if you have anyone you know who's in chronic pain, this could be the answer for you. So, okay, so you've got your business and your business model. How do you decide a pricing strategy for this? Because I'm thinking, like, anytime I'm in pain, and I have to tell you, I don't get pain very often. I get that intermittent pain where just give me something right now to make it go away. I don't suffer from pain that goes on and on forever. But I would imagine that people would pay pretty much anything to get relief. So
sometimes.
How do you decide? How do you decide a pricing strategy for something like this?
Well, that was one of the things that we needed to prove and have since starting kind of refined and learned. The first was I knew from other previous clinical business experience, specifically in the hearing aid industry, hearing aids in the United States are not covered by insurance. They're not inexpensive. It's, in fact, an average sale price is probably around $7,000. And so I thought, well, if people are going to spend that kind of money to get hearing loss resolved, they're willing to spend money to get out of pain, to your point, if this can really work. And so, I had kind of a basic idea before we began the operation of where I thought we could probably command a price that would make sense. And then I built a business plan and a pro forma structure around that. And our therapy is a process. It's not a procedure. It's not a product. And so that process is borne out over time. We're basically retraining the brain, which is neuroplasticity. And if we think about anything the brain is learning, like riding a bicycle or algebra or speaking Spanish, it's a process of repetition and re-exposure. So because of that, it's created some interesting processes of how do you price that, because do you charge somebody each time they come in? Do you sell them a package of a finite number at a discount? We've tried both of those things. What we've settled on is a pretty interesting pricing model, which is an annual membership, essentially. And that allows us to be a little bit more creative, to spread the cost out over a year's time, to set healthier expectations for a client about the fact that it's a process. And it makes it more affordable because they can push it out over the year's time. And it seems to work really quite well for our business. It does make it another aspect that's kind of unique because there's not many healthcare companies that sell memberships. So, that's another aspect of our business that's novel and takes some education to clients. But we give the first treatment for free. So I think that's part of our pricing position too, is like we want to create value and education. So we let clients come in for free. We spend it, which is basically a $500 value. We spend an hour with them, getting to know them, their goals, their definition of success, explaining what we do, explaining the neuroscience of pain, and then treating them for free. So we invest quite a bit on the front side to earn that customer's loyalty and trust and understanding. And a high percentage of those clients that get it for free see the value, and they're willing to invest in themselves as much as investing in us, and investing back into an idea of this is a path to get back to who I am as a person without pain.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks. So it's probably early days because you're still in you're about to start scaling, but is there an exit strategy? So did you see where this could go in the long term?
Yeah. So yes, absolutely. I mean, I think you have to kind of start with some sort of exit in mind. That exit may change. And what we've decided to do is try to create options, paths of opportunity. So we're building a service company, which is not so appealing to many institutional investors. Venture capital companies, private equity would love us, but we have to scale to a certain size before a private equity group would probably want to buy us. So those exits are potentially there at some point, with private equity. But what we've done is we filed with the Security and Exchange Commission here in the United States to begin what's called a Regulation A+ crowd-funded public offering. So this allows us to raise capital from anybody. You don't have to be an accredited investor. We can openly solicit. Chronic pain is such a real problem for so many people. Anybody can invest as little as $500. So it's pretty accessible to a lot of people, and we'll raise a bunch of money. That path through the Reg A or Regulation A+ allows us to list on an exchange, to become a public company on the NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange or other exchange, if we so choose. We think that's a little bit premature for us to do it. So we're not planning to do that, but we're preparing for that as the plan. But we also have a business that we've kind of created two different entities for. One is the technology business. It's about developing technology and selling the technology. The other one is the management company that has all the infrastructure and the employees and, a little bit more of a burden in terms of staffing. So we have two different options in terms of the entities. So that we might find that there's an acquirer that wants only the technology piece and we can sell that off, but retain the management piece. And maybe there's someone that says, hey, we like this infrastructure, we want to buy that, but we don't really care about research and development and bringing new technologies to market, so we'll let you keep that. So we have options, or we can combine them back together and list on the exchange at some point. So that's one of three options. Yeah.
So really well thought through in terms of there is something that can happen in the future. Because I do think a lot of people, when they get started, that's not even part of their thinking, which is one of the reasons I like to ask that question, is just to sort of get people thinking about what could be possible. So you said you've learned some things over the time, and you've alluded to some of those. So one of the questions that I like to ask to help people, because our listeners are people thinking about a business or, in that early stage, what's something, Brendan, that you really wish you had done differently back at the beginning?
Boy, I think the first thing is probably my mindset, is to just be open to the reality that it's going to be hard, but it is going to be hard. So just embrace it, and just have the confidence to move faster, to ask for help, or ask for investment, or, just to put myself into play a little bit more aggressively quicker, I think. I think all of us have great ideas, and like I said, there's no perfect time. So anybody listening that's thinking about that, give it a shot. Do the best you can. And, if you can do it part-time while you're not taking away from your current income stream, that's even better, because it reduces the stress load on yourself or your family. But start wherever you can and go.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? So is there anything else that you wish you'd known from the start? Now, you'd already worked with other startups, you'd helped build businesses. So, you came to this with a lot of knowledge. Is there something you wish you'd known?
Well, there's been a few things in our business that have been out of our control, in terms of kind of controlling the technology, getting rights to the technology, and some other factors. And so I have anticipated, I'm very much of an optimist, I think, maybe to our detriment, because I would, we'd raise money and I would deploy that money in certain ways, anticipating being able to grow faster than reality has unfolded for us. So maybe I would have been a little bit more conservative in some aspects in terms of how we deploy capital. I would have focused more on, trying to keep revenue growth happening, but again, I mean, had I not done, if I followed the path I followed, I still learned so much. So you can't really, criticize it too much. You just look in the rearview mirror and you go, okay, what worked, what didn't work? How can I do it better in the future? And that's part of the process.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason for this podcast, is to say, when we've looked at that rear vision mirror, what are those things that if we were joining the dots differently, that's, you can't join the dots forward. Is it Steve Jobs' quote, the one about the joining the dots? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And we don't have 20/20 hindsight, but, sometimes we can learn from what those that have done it, what they've learned. So you've mentioned Brendan Burchard. You've mentioned, the people that you've worked with in the past. Who else has been of greatest assistance to you? Where do you go for assistance?
That's a good question. I try to listen to everybody, particularly my investors, because when we receive a check from them, that's obviously the fuel in the tank that drives the engine, drives the car down the road. But they have had successes in their lives. They have experience that is relevant, and I listen to what their ideas are as much as possible. I think that's really helpful, and I think that they appreciate it too, because they like to know that they're writing a check to somebody and to an organization that values their opinion as much as their capital, or both. And so that, and then my wife, frankly, a lot. She's a sound reasoning board for me, and sometimes I get a little bit passionate, or I get a little bit myopic in my thinking, and she's able to help in that. And because she knows me better than anybody else too, probably.
Yeah. So does she give you good feedback? Is that where you get your feedback from as well?
Oh yeah, she gives me very good feedback.
Yeah, those closest to us know us, don't they? And they can call us on it. Do you get feedback anywhere else?
Definitely. I try to create an environment where our employees are giving feedback, and customers. I think it's, at this point, again, we look at it open-mindedly as a learning opportunity. And so, if we or I in particular ever become, overly confident or arrogant about things, then that's the point of pretty quick failure, I think, in many ways. So, and we have the luxury and the opportunity and the responsibility of building a business that's so novel. I mean, everything that we're doing is we're not trying to cram a technology into an existing business or world. We're crafting and creating that around our technology and around the evolution of the technology to create the best experience and the best business that we can. So all the feedback we can get about how do we do that, that's going to make it viable and successful and ultimately scalable, it would be stupid not to try to capture that.
Yeah, no, feedback's so valuable, isn't it? All right, you've sort of answered my next question, which is, what do you tell someone who wants to start their own business? You've said, get on with it.
Do it.
And,
yeah,
just do it. Is there anything else that you'd say?
Do it, and do it with an open mind to know it's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be fun. It's going to tax you and try you and teach you. And that's part of the process. I mean, you can't go into it and think I'm going to become a millionaire overnight. It may happen. Great. It probably won't. And, if you go in there and say, I'm going to do this because I'm passionate about it. I think the other thing too, is that for most of us, it has to be something that's more than just money. Like there has to be something that is intimately important to us in some way, or that we can see that adds value to people. Because if it's just about money, that's a very kind of like, binary experience. And if you go 6 months or a year or 2 years or whatever, and you haven't made money and that's all you care about, then it is a complete failure. But if you're doing it because there's something else that's important and you recognize that you're growing and benefiting and other people are by extension growing and benefiting, then it's still a win, even if it's not a financial return quite yet. And
as you said, it's one of the greatest personal development programs you can do is to start your own business. Yeah.
What I love is it is kind of an exclusive school of people that really do it, that really do it. And I don't care what industry it is. I don't care what product or service or whatever. When you see someone who is a true entrepreneur and the growth curve they've gone through that and the respect that they have for other people that are choosing to go through that, it's a fun program. And when I talk to people potentially like as an investor or something, I can always tell the people that have actually built companies because their mindset is different. They expect failure. They expect learning, and the questions they ask, it's just a different experience. And you can't learn it in business school. I mean, I have an MBA, and you learn way more in a year of starting and running a business than you ever do in a classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. And we could talk forever about that. So what are 3 characteristics that you have, and you've alluded to them through our conversation, but what are those 3 characteristics that make you successful, Brendan?
I think optimism. I'm optimistic that I can do it. I mean, I've really grown. One of Brendan Burchard's quotes is, have a high degree of confidence in your ability to figure things out. And I've definitely grown that over the years of being an entrepreneur. Passion, I believe in this, and the interesting thing too, there's a great book called Willpower Doesn't Work by Ben Hardy. Ben actually has become a friend of mine. He wrote about us in Inc. magazine about the book, and I've gotten to know him a little bit. He's a phenomenal guy. But that book, Willpower Doesn't Work, he talks about, we look at ourselves the same way we look at somebody else. So when we take action in a way that is demonstrating our own internal desire and ability or, commitment to doing something, it shifts our own psychology and it empowers us. Right. So, that is number 2. And my third is, going back to another Steve Jobs quote is I think he said something like, stay hungry and stay dumb. I'm probably a little dumb. I don't know. Like, I don't, I put a lot of thought into it, obviously, but at the same time, it's like, there are people who are far less intelligent than me that are very successful, way more successful than I am. So it's not about intelligence. I think it's about passion and, believing in yourself and getting to work.
And getting to work, that's right. So, and are these similar characteristics to, like, is this what people need to start a business? Like, that's the sorts of things, the characteristics people need?
I mean, I don't know that I can say that that's I think everybody's different, right? And I think everybody is their own person. And, there's another great influencer I love named Sally Hogshead, and she says, don't diminish who you are, become more of who you are. And that's been another thing. It's like, I wanted to fit a certain mold when I started the company of like, a CEO should do this or be this. I'm like, be myself. Like, I play in a punk rock band. I love making music. I paint, like, and I'm like, I talk about those things now more and more with my employees and with my investors, because it's part of my creative expression of who I am. And that's what they're investing in too.
They certainly are. Yeah, it's interesting. You get to a point where you just own that. I sort of have thought of myself as being a bit of a unicorn. I've never really fit it in, and sometimes I've wondered why. Like, how is it that I don't fit in with everything else? And now I'm really glad I don't, because it just allows me to do what I do. And it's why people love me, because, I'm not the same as everybody else that's doing what I'm doing. And I'm not for everybody, but those that I work for, then, that's how it works. So, yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Brendan. It would be fantastic to learn more. I'm going to read your book. I'm going to see what we can do. I know people who are in pain, and I've heard horrible stories about what it's like to live with pain over a long period of time. And it's just debilitating, for people. And so they do turn to what is believed to be the only solutions. So, I think what you're doing is incredible. And now to hear more about the business, and we'll look forward to watching this over the next couple of years. But before we go, is there anything else that I haven't asked you about that's super important that you'd like to end our podcast with?
Well, it's been a pleasure, and it's been a lot of fun. I'll just say this, I do feel tremendous, I guess honor is the right word, to do what I get to do, to be part of something that is intimately and importantly impactful to people's lives, to ease suffering. But what excites me even more is that there's so many people who are hurting, right? They're in chronic pain, physically, even emotionally. That's not really our specific focus, but it's related in many ways, right? Mm-hmm. So what I look at our ability to do is not only ease suffering in a safe and effective way, but to educate people and to empower them with the tools and with the confidence and the resources where we see them start to make changes, where they lose weight, they get engaged back in the hobbies and the activities and the relationships that make them feel joy and connected and productive. And that's what motivates me, is to be able to hopefully enter through pain, but shift society through so much other things that people can gain by better understanding about their brains and their bodies. And so anyway, I'm pleased to be here and share the message, and hopefully it helps some of the listeners out there in one way or another.
Indeed. And not just the pain part, but the actual business part as well, because there's been some pretty sound business advice there. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Oh, wasn't that a fantastic interview? Thanks for listening. This is a double benefit episode, isn't it? It's business, and maybe for anyone dealing with pain or knowing anyone dealing with pain, you now have a potential alternative. Definitely worth checking out what Brendan says there and checking out his book. The link is in the show notes. So what are you taking away from this conversation? What's one real standout moment for you? You may want to scroll back and listen to parts of it again. I listen to each episode about 3 or 4 times before they go to air. I especially like what Brendan says here about starting a business being one of the best personal development programs that you can do. He said you learn way more in a year in business than you ever learn in a university. For everyone listening, whether this is your first episode or you've been with us for some time, I truly believe that whatever you're dreaming about can become real. These podcasts are designed to inspire, educate, and inform about what it takes to start, create, and grow a business of your own. We truly believe these podcast interviews provide terrific value. And if you agree, please leave your comments and rate the podcast over on iTunes. We all know this helps with spreading the show with more people. Thank you so much for that. What questions do you have? How can I help you? Have you read the book? If you need any help or you have a question, please email me, ingrid@healthynumbers.com.au. Alternately, you might like to connect with me on LinkedIn. I answer all my own emails and I reply to LinkedIn messages. I believe it's important for you to have what you need. That's why I'm here. Again, I'd like to thank Brendan for his time and his wisdom and all his thoughts and energy for our interview. Thank you so much, Brendan. As always, we say here, ideas without action, well, they're just that. They're ideas. What actions are you inspired to take today? And as Brendan said, just jump in. Till the next time, thanks for listening.